Evening, everybody. My name is Corky. I'm with Yolo Basin Foundation, and I'm excited to be having our final Flyway nights tonight. I'm going to share up my screen. So to wrap up our year this evening, we're going to be hearing from Garrett Spaan. Garrett is our Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area manager, and he'll be talking about all of the various kinds of um, activities and improvements and such struggles maybe that have been going out there in our Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. Also want to make sure you know that we are starting to work on planning for next year. We got a couple of speakers lined up, but if you have ideas and speakers, I'd love to hear from you as well. So you can drop me an email or give a call to the office or whatever. And as a reminder, the end of this month, we have California Duck Days upon us. Super fun outdoor festival aimed at all ages. And so the kids have fun going in the pond, adults have fun touring the wildlife area. We also this year are pretty excited because we have a variety of animal presentations that will be happening more than we've had in the past. And if you're around and not bringing your family with you, but still want to come, maybe you want to help us out. So we are still looking for volunteers to help with putting on the event. I'm going to bring my screen back down and turn things over to Garrett. Welcome, Garrett. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Yes, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'll bring this up. Hello, everybody. My name is Garrett Spaan. I am the manager here at the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. This is my second year here at Yolo. I started in October of 2023. Previously, I worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of the Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge Complex, and I've really been enjoying my time here at the wildlife area. It's an incredible place. The habitat is incredible. The wildlife, the people, it's just a fantastic place to work, and I'm really enjoying my time here. So tonight's presentation, I'm going to do a quick overview of the wildlife area and then kind of go into some of the habitat management, which is really where our big concentration was this past year. And then I'm going to lead into some more projects and things that we have planned for this summer and some other projects that are going to be coming online here, hopefully in the future. So Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, it sits within the Region 3 of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. There are 7 regions within the state of California for Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're the Bay Delta region, located right here in between Davis and West Sacramento. The wildlife area was designated in 1994. It was open to the public in 1997. The total wildlife area is 16,771 total acres. It's about 22 square miles. Originally, the wildlife area was developed about 3,500 acres, and then the Thule Ranch was purchased later on. And so now we're managing 16,771 total acres. Primarily, the makeup of the wildlife area is wetlands, managed wetlands, uplands, agricultural lands, and riparian habitat. The agricultural lands, we have a couple thousand acres of rice on the north end of the wildlife area, and then we have irrigated pasture on the southern end of the wildlife area. The wildlife area was established for flood control, wildlife and habitat management, and then recreation and educational opportunities. So just some general information. So we're open sunrise to sunset every single day except for Christmas Day. It's the only day we're closed. There's a 7.5 mile auto tour route for wildlife viewing. We have quite a few hiking trails that are open from mid-February until early October. And then we have some permanent hiking trails around parking lots B and C. We're open to hunting, waterfowl, pheasant, and dove, and fishing. And then with the help of the Yolo Basin Foundation, we'll see approximately around 4,000 students annually and 8,000 hunters per year. So we've been working together with Yolo Basin Foundation. Yolo Bird Alliance was able to look at this as well, but we've been working on a new hiking trail map and public access map, primarily trying to develop trails that we thought would be, with our habitat management planning, a little bit more significant, and then trails that we could also maintain that aren't as impacted by flooding, trails that we can easily mow and keep accessible during the spring and summer. And so we're working on this hiking map right now and hopefully have it up on our website once we get everything approved. But you'll see the kind of red lines are going to be more of our seasonal hiking trails that are going to be open from that mid-February to early October timeframe. The yellow-orange are the permanent hiking trails. And then there's some more detailed information on the map about public access, when we open, when we close, best ways to view wildlife, things like that. So the main habitats at Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area are going to be seasonal wetlands, irrigated seasonal wetlands, permanent wetlands, summer wetlands, permanent sloughs, agricultural fields, uplands, vernal pools, irrigated pasture, and food plots. Primarily what we've been working on over the last year has really been our wetland component. So looking at our summer wetlands, our permanent wetlands, and then our irrigated, and then our seasonal wetlands, really developing a strong plan on how we're going to manage those complex habitats. The nice thing about Yolo, which is different than a lot of these managed wildlife areas, primarily for wetland habitat, is that we have thousands of acres of uplands that really encompass the potential for local wetland dependent species and nesting birds. And so we're really trying to integrate more of our summer habitat and take advantage of our upland cover that we have on the wildlife area for those local wetland dependent species and nesting birds. So how we're accomplishing a lot of our management is through a habitat management plan. So every year, the staff at Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, we get together and we develop an annual management plan. And we look at the entire 16,771 acres of the wildlife area, and we go unit by unit and we develop a plan for the next field season. So we completed this in February. We have developed our plan for this field season. And so we look at some of the problems and issues that we had. We evaluate the vegetation components in our units for noxious weeds or invasive weeds. We look at the irrigation schedules that we did, the benefits that were provided by doing irrigations, and then the moist soil plants that were germinated because of those irrigations. And then we also look at our water conveyance system. So our delivery canals, our drain ditches, our lift pumps, our water control structures, screw gates. We look at all the things that we have issues with, and we try to develop a priority list on what we want to get done to be able to maneuver water more efficiently across the wildlife area. We also look at our facilities, so roads, signage, viewing areas, parking lots, and we, again, prioritize the roads that are going to need the most work, parking lots that maybe need more gravel, signs that need to be replaced, and we develop that plan. And then we also set up our flood updates and our drawdown dates. So typically with our seasonal wetland management is we're drawing down in the springtime, so March into May, which is what's happening right now. And then our flood up is going to start around September 1st, and our flood up will continue all the way into December. And so we look at our units and we look at the habitat, and we develop a plan for those drawdown dates and those flood updates. A lot of these things are scheduled to change. You know, we're also adaptive in how we evaluate and manage the property. So based on what we see during the field season, you know, different vegetation components, we will adapt to our flood updates or our irrigation dates based on what we're seeing on the ground. So one of the big components of managing our wetlands is our water infrastructure. Yolo is primarily run off of the tow drain. So that's the large canal to the east of the wildlife area. It's a tidally influenced canal. We use lift pumps to actually lift the water out of the tow drain, and then it goes into a maze of delivery canals throughout the wildlife area. And that is how we get the water from wetland to wetland and maneuver it across the wildlife area. We have lift stations from north to south across north to south down the property. Each one of those lift stations has a specific management block that it actually sends water to. And then we have internal lift stations that will actually lift the water out of delivery canals into other delivery canals to move the water across the landscape. Once the water is in our delivery canals, it's going to run through screw gates, pictured here. And then we will actually open those gates depending on how much water we want to move into any different unit. The drawdown is very similar. So in this picture right up here, you can see the swales that move throughout a big, large wetland unit. As we pull boards or open screw gates, the water recedes into these delivery swales and potholes, and then it'll slowly come out of the wetland and then dry up. And that's when the germination process begins for those moist soil plants that we're looking for food resources in the winter. So most of the wetlands you're going to see on the wildlife area are going to be seasonal wetlands. So these are wetlands that are typically going to be drawn down March 15th to May 15th. We don't typically irrigate these. We're really using our drawdown timing to keep good soil moisture to germinate swamp timothy. And then swamp timothy will then grow throughout the summer months, produce a seed head. It's a very low growing plant. Some units we may see it about 6 inches tall. Some units it may only be 2 to 3 inches tall, but it produces a seed head. And it also provides really good structure for invertebrates for migratory birds and our local birds. Most of our seasonal wetlands, you will see in them, you'll get cocklebur, sweet clover, plants like that will grow. Those types of plants we will target with mowing, disking, or spraying to control that, to reduce the competition on the moist soil that we want to produce so that the birds can actually access that food and get to the invertebrates. So every unit that you see on this wildlife area is going to be touched with some type of piece of equipment, whether it's a mower or a disc. We're going to be doing some target vegetation management, even on our units that we're not irrigating or setting back. Typically, we're going to start our flood up on these seasonal wetlands on September 1st. We bring on a smaller chunk of habitat for the early migrants in early September. And then as we move into October, we flood up additional acres. So you may see 800 acres or so that will start flooding from September 1st to September 15th. And then you'll probably see 1,000 to 1,200 acres that'll start September 15th. And it'll go into October 1st. And then by October 1st, you're probably going to see a couple thousand acres that'll start flooding during the month of October. And then we'll scale back down, and another 500 to 800 acres will come on around November 1st. And we will continue to flood up all the way into December to keep good food availability as the migration continues throughout the wintertime. The target of these seasonal wetlands is for shallow flooded wetland habitat. So we're really trying to hit about 8 inches of average depth in a lot of our seasonal wetland units for dabbling ducks, shorebirds, wading birds. They really are targeting that shallow flooded wetland component. They don't want to see 2 feet of water out there. We're really targeting shallow flooded wetlands. You will see some of these wetlands will have mud flats along the edges, which is really what we want to see. We'd much rather see these units be too shallow than too deep. Once they get too deep, a lot of the birds really can't access the food resources that they're trying to get. So we really are targeting these shallow flooded wetlands for the wildlife that are using the wildlife area. Irrigated seasonal wetlands are going to be more labor intensive. There's a lot more going on for these wetlands. These units will typically have a planned drawdown schedule to germinate a certain type of plant. Typically, you're going to see watergrass, smartweed are going to be a couple of the moist soil plants, but we also will irrigate swamp timothy to germinate additional seed heads. A little bit different in how we irrigate our watergrass units versus a swamp timothy unit. Timothy is going to be a flash irrigation, so really quick, 2 to 4 days. we want to just get the feet wet of the plants, and then we want to pull the water right off. If we hold the water on too long, it'll actually kill a lot of the timothy that's germinated. So it's a really fast, quick irrigation. Where watergrass is going to be a longer irrigation. Sometimes we may do multiple irrigations during a season, but typically you see a week to 2 weeks, hold the water to get the plants germinated. And then as it stresses, we'll irrigate again to produce the seed on the watergrass. Same thing with smartweed. The irrigations are really important in the summertime because it provides really good habitat value for all the local wetland dependent species that are on the wildlife area. And also upland birds and other wildlife will utilize that flash of water during the summertime when things are fairly dry and arid. And that's also why the rice farming is so important on the wildlife area, is that we're providing wetland habitat during a time frame where it's typically pretty dry in the valley. So those resources are very, very important. And this is where we've been spending a lot of our time this last year, is in the permanent and summer wetland component. So a permanent wetland will be flooded for 1 to 3 years. So it won't be drawn down. It'll have water on it. Typically, once you hit that 3-year mark, you're going to see explosions with primrose, cattail, joint grass, and you kind of lose a unit. You lose a lot of the value for it. So, that 1 to 2 years is typically what we're going to do, is we'll hold those permanent wetlands. And then once we see issues with vegetation, we will draw them down. And then we'll do a setback, which is pretty much putting a disc in a unit and really trying to control that vegetation, revive it, and then flood it back up and put it back into the rotation. So what we've been trying to do on the wildlife area is develop a rotation between our permanent wetlands and our summer wetlands and then our seasonal wetlands. And when we're looking at these units that we want to hold summer water in, water availability is the key. So if we're turning on lift pumps and delivering water throughout our conveyance system to get it to these units, it's not very efficient. So we're looking for units that are off close to deliveries, that have good access to water, that hold water pretty well, so that we can flood them up and they'll hold water, and then we top them off throughout the summer to keep that summer wetland component. And then the summer wetlands, you're not going to see permanent water, so you'll see them flooded in the wintertime, and we'll hold those units until mid-July, mid-August, around that time frame, and then we'll actually draw them down. We'll get in there with equipment and try to work the habitat and then reflood them in the fall. You could still get, especially here, we see them with our lift pumps, we bounce the water a little bit, which isn't great for joint grass, cattails, things like that. But what it does is it provides really good edge habitat. So you get germinations of watergrass and sprangletop, smartweed. You'll get really good timothy on high benches. And so by kind of bumping the water up and down, we're actually germinating good winter food plants and maintaining that summer component for, duck broods, shorebirds that are here throughout the summer. So we're creating that summer habitat that's so important. The big issue with the summer water and our permanent wetlands is that during the summertime is the noxious vegetation. So primrose, cattail, joint grass, azolla, we get explosions with those types of plants in these wetlands. And so they are very time consuming for management, the setbacks, the control of those noxious weeds. And you start to lose them if you really don't stay on top of the work and managing the vegetation component. But it's worth the hard work because of the resource that it does provide during that summertime. So yeah, this last year, we really were, with me being new to the wildlife area, was really me working with staff here and looking at these rotations for our summer wetlands and trying to figure out which ones we can utilize and develop that rotation so that we can have a plan of which units we want to keep in summer water, which ones we want to draw down and rework for vegetation controls, and then developing which ones we could potentially even permanent water that are a little bit deeper, don't fill in full of cattail and primrose quite as quick. And then some of the projects we're going to be evaluating in the future are going to be projects looking at summer wetlands or permanent wetlands that we could do a little bit of dirt work. So if we hold the water a little bit deeper during the summertime, 20 inches, 24 inches or so, you won't get the explosion of cattail. So we're going to be working with our partners to try to develop projects to clean out swales, develop some deeper potholes so we can keep these units a little bit more open and they won't be quite as labor intensive. So some of the projects that we're working on that we worked on last year and really more so the things that we're really gearing up for this summer, we're going to talk about those right now. So road maintenance, you know, anyone that comes out here to the wildlife area and recreates, whether it's hunting or fishing or wildlife viewing or educational programs, our roads really do get in pretty bad shape. We have very high visitor use. We have flooding, water on our roads, and we're in dire need of gravel. So last year we were able to get funding for $75,000 worth of gravel, and we primarily used most of that gravel on the auto tour route to try to improve some of our roads along that auto tour section. It's been great. We were able to really use our road grader, some of our tractors, and really fix up some of those roads. And then, of course, this year it flooded again. And so we had all sorts of road damage. And we're having to get back out there and work the roads over again. We were able to get $125,000 this year for more gravel. All that gravel is going to be going on our public access roads, north and south on the wildlife area to improve parking lots, to improve the auto tour route, to improve our access on the southern end of the wildlife area. But we're really trying to build up our gravel roads so we can actually maintain them. When we don't add gravel, we lose our crown, and that's like the top of the road. And so when we're using a road grader, we want to crown the road so that when water, it'll actually flow off the sides and not sit on the road. We don't have enough gravel on our roads right now to really maintain them properly. So as we build up our gravel supply and continue to add gravel on these roads, we will be able to maintain them properly. So any projects that we're doing right now, we're trying to incorporate some component of gravel for public access to improve our roads, because probably looking at about $1 million to gravel every single gravel road that we have on the wildlife area. And that's just not something we can do on an annual basis. So it's going to be a slow approach, but we are trying to prioritize the worst sections of roads on the wildlife area and get those fixed with the funding that we do have. So Yolo Basin Foundation was able to secure a state grant. That grant is really going to be aimed at improving some of the educational facilities around the headquarters building for the school programs, as well as to buy a mobile visitor center that will be in the wildlife area to provide interpretation to visitors as they come to the wildlife area. The other really awesome thing that we're going to be seeing from that grant is new signage around the wildlife area. So I took a picture of kind of our entry sign right now. And so we're going to try to get all new signs, new entry signs, new billboard signs, new directional signs to direct visitors throughout the wildlife area to the different parking lots, different hiking trails, and then also some interpretive signage to try to inform visitors of what's going on the wildlife area, that there are some sensitive areas where really you're better off staying in your vehicle. If you're trying to view wildlife, you can use your vehicle almost as a blind. Especially the birds, the ducks, the geese, they get used to seeing the vehicles. What they don't get used to is people walking out into the closed zones. That will scare every bird off. So we're going to work on doing some interpretive signage to just inform people on that. And then the directional signs to all the different parking lots and the hiking trails, and then some interpretive displays in parking lot B and C and the check station, just to provide some more history, management objectives of what we're doing on the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. But we're very excited to get this project, and hopefully it will be implemented this summer, and we'll have all new signs for the fall around the wildlife area. And it's a big thank you to Yolo Basin Foundation for securing this grant and working so hard to get this project implemented. We're also in the stages of a pre-proposal with the Wildlife Conservation Board. I'm working with California Waterfowl right now. We submitted a proposal for a public access for all grant. And this grant is going to be aimed at acquiring a lot of gravel to really work on our parking lots and our roads. We also put into this proposal 2 viewing platforms that we'd like to install in the wildlife area along the auto tour route. This picture Right here is at a parking lot B. So that was one of the locations that we were thinking about putting a low profile viewing platform. It's a big parking lot and a good area for school groups, for birding groups that want to come out to the wildlife area, just be a good place to have it. So we're looking at a viewing platform there, and then a second one somewhere else along the wildlife area. We're also going to be doing a accessible hiking trail between parking lots B and C, and then using the rest of the gravel to work on our access roads, parking lots, and then also purchasing some new hunting blinds to replace the old ones that are all cracked, and then a new accessible hunting blind. It's a floating blind that's wheelchair accessible. And then it'll be a huge head start for us on our public access. And we're really looking forward to hopefully getting this funding and then implementing this project in the years to come. So one project that is still in the works. It is not, we don't have a date yet exactly on when it will be operable, but the Yolo Bypass Salmonoid Habitat Restoration and Fish Passage Project, also known as Big Notch. So this project, which is to create rearing habitat in the Yolo Bypass and fish passage to the Sacramento River, would allow 6,000 CFS to enter through a gated notch in the Fremont Weir from November 1st to March 15th. So what this potentially does to the wildlife areas, there is potential negative impacts for our ability to manage that shallow flooded wetland habitat. That is our target. It's potentially going to impact our ability to drain, as well as manage that shallow flooded habitat, and then also potentially impact our ability to provide public access into the wildlife area. So the way the wildlife area works, is we have the tow drain along the eastern side of the wildlife area, and then we have tributaries that come from the western side of the bypass, Poudre Creek, Willow Slough, Cache Creek, and then you have the Sacramento River and the Fremont Weir above. And so when the tow drain is inundated with water, all those western tributaries, there's no room for the water to go anywhere. And so what we see is it starts backing up along the western side of the wildlife area, and then you see issues with our entrance road going over, or potential issues on other sections of our access. And so when our roads flood and you can't tell where a wetland is or a canal is, that's when we have to close the wildlife area for access. So we are working on looking at some projects with DWR to potentially improve access during operation, raising some roads, replacing some culverts, things like that, where we see pinch points on the wildlife area from flooding, to hopefully combat some of our issues for public access. But this is something that would operate from November 1st to March 15th and at approximately about 6,000 CFS running through that gated notch. So again, no final word on anything on this right now, but it's just something that I wanted to bring up to have on everybody's mind, because there will be some impacts to the wildlife area. Another thing we spent a lot of effort on last summer was developing a banding program on the wildlife area. So USGS was an incredible partner this last summer, and they had a crew on the wildlife area banding shorebirds and waterfowl from spring all the way through summer into early fall. They were using swimming traps, rocket nets, mist nets, bow nets. And it was really a great thing to see. The staff here at the wildlife area were able to help band birds, run the swimming traps, help out on the rocket nets. And so it was an awesome thing to see. It really gets to show, when we're doing these banding projects, why we manage those summer wetlands, why we put so much effort into the management of these types of habitats. And the other really neat thing with the banding program is not only were we just banding birds, but we're also putting GPS transmitters on these birds. And from our ability to manage habitat, it's awesome when you have transmitters on different species of birds and you can track the migration. You can look at wintering habitat and see what habitat types they're really preferring over others. And it gives us some real-time data as we manage these different habitat types and what the wildlife are really looking for. And it informs our decision-making and how we manage these different habitats. So from last summer's effort, 266 birds were banded and 29 GPS transmitters were put out. The species that that received the GPS transmitters were northern pintail, gadwall, mallard, American widgeon, northern shoveler, American green-winged teal, cinnamon teal, blue-winged teal, American avocets, and long-billed curlew. So we're hoping USGS will come back out again this summer, along with some of our other partners, and continue these efforts, banding shorebirds and ducks and other waterfowl on the wildlife area. So going more into the habitat projects that we're looking at implementing this summer, we have a lot of projects. That couple were supposed to go to construction last summer, but they didn't. So we're hoping they'll all go to construction this summer. But we have a California duck stamp project that's going to be down in the Twin Lakes management area. We have 3 NAWCA projects, and one in Parker, one in Mace, and one in Poudre Creek. And then last year we planted about 125 acres of winter wheat as part of the Nesting Bird Habitat Incentive Program. And we'll continue proposals for that and continue our efforts on that program. And then we're also working with Ducks Unlimited on a continuation of a drainage improvement project that was completed a couple years ago. So I'm going to show on a map where a lot of these projects are going to be, because that's a lot of names. So the drainage improvement project we're working on with Ducks Unlimited is going to be in the Four Risers area right here, in the 1,000 acres and the rice. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on what we're doing here in this project. The Mace project, as part of NAWCA, is going to be in these 2 seasonal wetland units right here. The Parker project is going to be working in a lot of this right in here. And then Poudre Creek is this big unit right here in the middle sanctuary. Twin Lakes, the duck stamp project, is down here, these 2 units. And then a lot of our effort with the Nesting Bird Habitat Incentive Program has been over here in the Fortis area, where there's a pretty large component of uplands. And then right here, this upland right here in Mace. So the Twin Lakes project, the California duck stamp project, so that was funded with the California duck validation revenue that waterfowl hunters are required to purchase to hunt in California. The goal of this project is to combine 2 units. So Twin Lakes 9W and 9E are split into 2 separate units, about 40 acres apiece. And so the idea is we're going to combine these 2 units. So there's a levee across the middle. We'll take the levee out and then contour both units to be somewhat level, and then redo all the delivery swales that deliver the water from the inlet to the outlets, and then re-level and reset the outlet structures. So ideally, the goal of this project is to make a larger unit that has better management capabilities for us either to irrigate, manage as a semi-perm or summer wetland, and then take away some of our lower depressions, which the low spots that we can't drain, that's where we start seeing a lot of our noxious weeds, primrose, joint grass, things like that, because we're not able to actually drain the water off. So this is a really exciting project. Really looking forward to getting this one going. So here's another look at what it looks like from an aerial view. So you can see there's a levee that runs on the north end and then down the middle. So that'll be gone. And then this was cut real deep swales, deep potholes. And so we're going to try to level both of these units out. And you know, you still have some fall, of course, from north to south for drainage, but trying to get them as level as possible and still maintain some good topography across the perimeter. All right, so the drainage improvement project that we're working on with Ducks Unlimited, this is primarily going to be working on our water infrastructure. We have one of our main deliveries is called the 55 delivery, and that's a lift pump that's right on the tow drain, and that runs water into the wildlife area and maintains the wetlands in the Four Risers area, as well as the rice in the 1,000 acres. So it's very important for our farming operation on the wildlife area, but also for our winter management for habitat. We have a lot of issues right now with our ability to convey water through that canal. River otters, beavers have tunneled their way through the levees that hold the water in. And so we lose a lot of that water, just floats right out of it. So we need to repair the cross dikes on either side of that canal. And then we have old metal structures at the Four Risers Basin that have been there since probably the late 90s, early 2000s. So they're worn out. They have holes all over them. They leak water like crazy. So we need to replace all of those structures. And then we're going to build up some of our delivery ditches on the bottom end and try to convey water easier to the bottom end of the 1,000 acres. So we have more ability to manage winter habitat. We'll replace quite a few water control structures that are looking like this. So after years of flooding, you get water control structures that are eroded, have holes all the way around them. And so we have to repair them by pulling them out. The other thing we're going to be looking at with our water control structures, because of the flooding, is making our structures a little bit bigger so we can move more water and also drain a little bit faster as well. So this is the yellow lines around this is pretty much what the drainage improvement project is going to be looking at. This is that 55 delivery, runs all the way through here, and that's sending all the water down into all of this, as well as all the water over into here. So we need to replace the structures, redo our delivery and the levees on either side of it, and then our drain structures and some delivery canals down on the bottom end as well. But it'd be a very good project to get done for our water conveyance. The Nesting Bird Habitat Incentive Program, short for NB-HIP. So this is funded through increases in the upland and California duck stamp validations that hunters are required to purchase to hunt upland birds or ducks in California. And so the increase was $10, and that money that's being generated is being used to enhance upland or native grass habitat in California. We've seen a lot of declines in our local duck nesting production, local mallards, gadwall, cinnamon teal. And so we're really trying to target some of these resources towards improving the nesting cover and upland habitat on our wildlife areas. So these units are some pictures we took. So we planted about 125 acres to winter wheat in a vetch mix for nesting. Unfortunately, everything we planted in the fall flooded and it killed everything we planted. So we didn't get any winter wheat to come out. Right now we're seeing a lot of ryegrass coming up in those units, but we will continue to try to plant them, seed them, and germinate these cereal grains for nesting. And then as we get control of the invasive species in these upland units by doing a winter wheat rotation, the goal is to then plant them to native grass and wildflowers and then have native uplands around our wetland units. But it's very helpful to do a rotation of a winter wheat type crop to get a control of some of our noxious weeds and invasive weeds that are growing in these uplands. And then we can go back and plant natives. So we will be strategically moving around our NB-HIP projects around the wildlife area. We really got to concentrate on the higher ground that doesn't flood quite as easily. So we're targeting upland areas that are on a little bit higher ground, traditionally going to be more on the western side of the wildlife area to do our NB-HIP plantings. All right, so we're working with California Waterfowl. We have 3 funded NAWCA grants for Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. NAWCA is the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. So what we're looking at with all 3 of these projects are all going to be wetland related projects with some native grass component. The first one is Parker. So that's on the western side of the wildlife area, just north of Puda Creek. And so we have a permanent wetland right here. And so we're going to be working on redoing the swales, the delivery swales, cutting some of the higher ground, developing some potholes so we can manage the water a little bit deeper, and then restoring a lot of the swales that run through some of these upland units like that. So we can run water in these units through the summer in the swales, produce invertebrates for local ducks, pheasants, so that there's a good food source for them. And then restore some of the upland habitat along the edge of this wetland into native grass right here in the green. And then some more native grass in this northwest corner of Parker. the Mace Unit project. So this is going to be, you've probably seen it if you come out on the tour out, but we have the old, the small rectangular ponds. There were a mercury study that was done there. So this whole area, we're going to convert to native grass, do a native grass planting, and then redo our delivery swales, do a little bit of leveling, and then native grass along the perimeter of the wetland, replace some water control structures here. And then same thing in the bottom unit, redo the delivery swales, replace some water control structures, do a little bit of leveling, and then native grass restoration on the higher ground. The Poudre Creek unit, it's a very big wetland, part of the old Poudre Creek sink. This unit, we have swales that need to be repoled just to move water across the unit a little bit more efficiently. And then also during our drawdown to get the water off and start our germination for swamp timothy. We're also going to do a little bit of leveling over here, develop some new loafing islands or rebuild the ones that we already have, and then add some tule transplants just to provide a little bit more structure in a fairly open wetland unit. And then also replace our outlet structures and inlet structures. The Yolo County Resource Conservation District also received some wildlife conservation board funding. And so we're working with them. They're going to be doing some pollinator plots. They already planted one here at the headquarters office, and they're going to be doing some pollinator plots in and around parking lots A and B, and then also doing some pollinator plots along Poudre Creek. We have a riparian section, and also doing some riparian shrubs and grasses within that riparian section. So that's going to be a really good project, and plant some pollinator habitat. And that should all be planted here this spring and be done. And then we'll just be on maintenance mode for that one. But it's been great working with them, and great projects to be putting out on the wildlife area. All right, so some of the other things that we have going on the wildlife area, we're working with River Partners right now. They have a planning grant that they got from CDFW to look at developing a bypass channel in parking lot G. So this would be for Poudre Creek for the fall run salmon, so that they can swim up, not be impacted by the dam that we have right there. And so we'd have a bypass channel around parking lot G. So as the fish swim up Poudre Creek, they can go through the bypass channel and get above where the check dam is. Last year, Solano County Water Agency, along with the wildlife area, some of our neighbors, Los Rios Farms, everybody worked together, and then Solano County staff was able to install a fish ladder, and it worked. We saw salmon swim up the fish ladder. We're able to get up Poudre Creek. And so we have high hopes that the bypass channel would be a great permanent structure that will allow us to still use the check dam to manage the wetland habitat that we have on the wildlife area that we need the check dam to flood, thousands of acres of wetlands, as well as some of the rice ground that's around the wildlife area to provide that fall winter habitat in the rice fields. So it's a really good partnership, and I'm really excited for this one. I think it's going to be a great project. And so we're working with River Partners right now to plan this out and get all the permitting done, and then hopefully implement a project after that. The Burrowing Owl Preservation Society, we're working with them. They are looking to write some grants to do some vegetation control. We have artificial burrows on the southern end of the wildlife area for burrowing owls, and we do have burrowing owl population. And so the Burrowing Owl Preservation Society is going to be working with staff on the wildlife area and the Yolo County RCD to do vegetation control around those burrows, and then also implement some perches, and then look at some vegetation controls on some other portions of the wildlife area, and do a little bit of monitoring to evaluate what the burrowing owl population is doing on the wildlife area. Point Blue is out right now on the wildlife area doing their spring shorebird captures. So trapping different shorebird species and doing same idea with the GPS transmitters to really get an idea of the migration and idea of what the habitat needs are for different shorebird species. And so they've been working on the wildlife area for a few years now doing these captures, and we always get great feedback from them. And it's great to have them here and again, providing some more information to us on how we manage the wildlife area. So all of that data is so important to what we're doing. The upland game program for CDFW has also been rolled out last year, our automated recording units throughout the entire 16,771 acre wildlife area. And the goal of this project was really to look at the pheasant distribution across the wildlife area. And again, that guides our management, knowing kind of where some of those populations are and what kind of habitats they're utilizing, so we can try to mimic that on other locations in the wildlife area. So that's been really awesome to have them out here with those. And the hope with those automated recording units is then to potentially use them for other species, because they're picking up like the crow calls of the pheasant. They could do the same thing with ducks. They could do the same thing with songbirds in riparian corridors, turkeys, yellow-billed cuckoo. So there's all different species potential with those automated recording units to better manage habitat on wildlife areas and other locations across the state of California. Some other things for the wildlife area. So we do have a new rice leasee, the Magenheimer brothers, who are going to be farming rice up on the top end of the wildlife area. We're super excited to have them. It's been great working with them so far. We were able to hire 3 new seasonal aides in November that are helping us here at the wildlife area, and they've been a great addition to our team, and still working with our headquarters staff and trying to figure out ways to get some more full-time employees on the wildlife area so we can really get this place staffed appropriately for the size and complexity of what we're managing. So I think I'm hopeful that by this time next year, we will have some more permanent staff on the wildlife area as well. But things are going great on the wildlife area. We're having, we saw some incredible winter surveys for waterfowl this year. Our environmental scientists did a January survey, and we had over 100,000 ducks and 40,000 geese in January that were using the wetlands on the wildlife area. So it's great when we work hard. The staff here works so hard to manage this habitat. And then you get to see the return when the wildlife really come back and utilize those resources. And it makes you feel really good with all the hard work you put into managing these types of habitats and the complexity that comes along with it. So things are going real good, and we appreciate any feedback and all feedback on what we do. And if you have any questions about our habitat management planning or projects, you feel free to reach out to the wildlife area, call the headquarters office, reach out to the foundation, and I would do my best to answer whatever questions you may have.
Thank you, Garrett. I'm happy also to pass on some questions. I do see one comment in the chat, and maybe some other questions will come in. The comment was, I wonder if photography blinds could be included in the project.
I think that is definitely something we could look at. We did not have photography blinds in our pre-proposal. I think there's also other mechanisms that we could try to evaluate to fund those.
Obviously, a photographer in the group. Any other comments or questions? A comment, fantastic amount of information. Actually, I was really impressed. I've been watching the participant numbers, and sometimes, we get some drop off, and Garrett, you help people. So we obviously have some people who are very interested in the wildlife area here. Anybody else have questions? This is your chance, right? We got Garrett here. How affected is the wildlife area by management north of the causeway?
On the wildlife area or on the private property north of the wildlife area?
I think the question is, how is our area affected by what they do in the north?
A lot of this system is connected, right? So if they implement projects on private property, especially with Willow Slough. So Willow Slough runs through the private property to the north of the wildlife area and then drains out through the wildlife area. So we have great relationships with our neighbors. And so we really do communicate and coordinate. So if we do see projects north of us, we're usually involved in those conversations and in that dialogue.
Probably to the south of us too.
Yep.
You have the
Yep.
duck clubs down there.
North, south, west. We have a lot of really great landowners all the way around us.
How is the north resting ponds used in relation to the hunting area? As in, is there an amount of area the ducks need?
The north area, I mean, it's the core sanctuary, the rice, but we have sanctuaries spread out north and south. And, you know, if you look at the flooded acres, you're probably looking at about a 50-50. So hunting is 3 days a week. It's Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday. So 4 days out of the 7, there isn't any hunting going on in the hunting area. So it's providing that sanctuary and those resources outside of those days. So I think the way this wildlife area is set up, we're providing ample amount of sanctuary for the species we have on the wildlife area, and then also having those non-shoot days, they're able to get into those areas as well.
Another comment. Thanks so much. Exciting to hear about all your work, and it is much more complex than I realized.
It is.
Yes, it is. It's very complex out there. All right. Well, thank you, Garrett. Appreciate all the information. I will work on getting the recording up to our YouTube so others who maybe were interested can check it out, or if anybody wants to hear a piece again. So lots of good comments coming in there. Hopefully you can see them. Garrett, thanking you for the presentation.
All righty. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, always great. And hopefully we'll see some of you at Duck Days.
I will be there with all 3 kiddos.
Excellent. Excellent. Love to have you. All right. Thanks a
you.
lot, Garrett. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.